March is coming to an end, and with the end of March comes new data from new pollsters on President Donald Trump's presidency. This is the stuff the media doesn't want you seeing, but I'm covering it right here on American Advocates. We're going to start right here with recent poll results from Gallup, and take note of the fact right off the bat, Gallup is a liberal pollster. They're liberally tainted, so when we see the first stat up here on his approval rating for his first and second term, overall U.S. adults, 42% during his first term, and they're marking him currently at 45% for his second term right now, 3 points up. However, I personally am of the opinion that 45% is still very much so on the low end. This is a liberal pollster. They've been liberally influenced. What is the most revealing and most important to focus on are the next ones. These are broken down by demographics. You have the men. Donald Trump has historically done decent with men, but so much so more in his second term, as he's up 6 points from his second term to his first term. Men, 48% approving of his first term in 2017. Second term now, 54%. Mind-blowing. Over half of men, well over half of men in America approve of the job President Trump is doing. Now here's the next one. This one's shaky. Women. They don't like Trump that much. Not all of them, at least. And with women, it hasn't changed. And this is not surprising, because the problem right now is there is a big divide between men and women politically. It's something that is alarming. It's also by design. This is intended by the mainstream overlords and their rulers too. They want the divide between men and women to take hold, because they know that if men and women are divided, then houses are divided, and there's a whole host of problems that comes with that. It's designed to be this way, though, and I'm hoping that that works itself out over a period of the next 4 to 8 years, as ideally America enters a new golden age, and many people will be forced into seeing the reality of what the two parties are and which one is obviously the better choice. But for now, there is a big divide, and that's why only 36% of women approved of President Trump in his first term, and still only 36% of women approve of him in his second term. Women are more emotional. This is just how it is. I'm going to call a spade here when it comes to this. White liberal women are perhaps the most annoying demographic to deal with. I think we all know that, and for good reason. But there is much more good news right on the horizon here, starting right off the bat with the young age demographic, age 18 to 29, separated out in this Gallup poll. And look at the results of that. Only 31% approved of Trump in this age demographic in his first term. That's up 6 points to 37%. Still the minority, of course, but that's a big deal, because Republicans historically have not been considered very cool by young people. I think immediately of Bill Clinton appearing on late night talk shows with his saxophone, and how that was such an anti-establishment cool thing to do then, right? And the Republicans' reaction to that was a shock and horror. How unprofessional of a presidential candidate to go on late night TV and play an instrument of all things. And little did they know at the time that their actual very reaction to that would set the tone for what the Republican Party was and would continue to be for the next 25 years almost. So, Democrats have had the stronghold on the youth for quite a while, and I would say why they still technically do is because they obviously have propaganda farms in the form of schooling. They have complete control over the education system. And until Linda McMahon and Donald Trump take care of that, it is what it is for now. It's still a good sign to see. I'd also say the reason why the second term 18 to 29-year-olds still poll at 37% would be because of the young Gen Z women. They tend to be more liberal than ever, and where you see the biggest gender divide that I was previously talking about between men and women, you're seeing that big time in the Gen Zers actually, because Gen Z men are becoming historically more conservative, especially for being so young, whereas Gen Z women are very liberal. And so I actually have a lot of sympathy for that generation, because that's a problem, and it's going to correct itself, I think, over time. But millennial men, and especially Gen Z men, are kind of going to suffer through that problem. The next age demographic, age 30 to 49, this is where people start to become more conservative, typically, if they're going to ever embrace that path. President Trump is up another whopping 6 points in that demographic, too, from 40% in his first term to 46%. I mean, that's also just ginormous leaps and bounds, huge stride there. Age 50 to 64, it's where I'd say most people, you're going to find the most conservatives, and that's why this makes the most sense. Only 1 point change, but it was already pretty high at 48% up to 49%. And age 65, that's where, what you're seeing here is a 6-point decrease, and I think that's actually easily explained. 65, you think elderly, right? And with elderly people, unfortunately, they're easily fooled, and their sources for information are outdated. It's always been like this. It's just how it is. Most people, as they age, fail to adapt with the times. And so I wouldn't expect a gazillion 65-year-olds to be consuming their political information from sources like independent journalists and YouTube and everything else. They're still watching mainstream media, most of which is perpetuating a ginormous false lie that President Donald Trump is coming for their Medicare, their Medicaid, and Social Security. And so they're going to watch that, and over time, you tell a lie long enough and people believe it. And when you're elderly, it's just how it is. Elderly people tend to be, these are the people that get fooled with phone calls and convinced to send $20,000 over to India, basically. And so it's the same, it transfers the same way with media, and unfortunately I think that's what's happening with them, and that's why we're seeing such a decline in approval rating points with that demographic for Trump. But there's still more good news, because after the age demographic, we hit race and ethnicity. And this is fascinating. This is an interesting one. I'm not going to cover this entire list. I'm going to actually end it, this coverage right here. But look at the race and ethnicity stats. This is another one where Republicans they should have by all means had a good grasp on different races and ethnicities when it comes to popularity, but they let history kind of wither away, and they let the narrative of history be spun and controlled by the Democrats for far too long. But that's changing. Non-Hispanic white adults, he's down a little bit with them. However, people of color overall, look at that. He's up by 12. That's ginormous, up to 32%. And specifically, non-Hispanic black adults, 13 to 22%. Now, when it comes to non-Hispanic black women, I believe, off the top of my head, I believe that they have the lowest approval rating for President Trump. I think it was something like 9%. But non-Hispanic black men, much different story. They're coming out more and more in droves. And again, we see the gender divide. It is affecting races and ethnicities too. But 13 to 22%, up 9 points. That's big. For a Republican president, that's huge. Hispanic adults, look at this one, up 15. And what the liberals did over the last 4 years, flooding our borders with more and more immigrants. Their plan was, we'll give them all this stuff, we'll flood the swing states with them, we'll give them free stuff, and they'll vote for us. And I'm sure that worked to a degree. However, what they weren't counting on is the Hispanic demographic is actually very traditional. So you have Hispanics that came in, and they actually wound up actually this poll confirms it, right? They wound up voting for Donald Trump in higher numbers than expected, because he actually represents more of the traditional conservative values that they believe in to begin with. So in a cruel twist of fate and irony, tragic irony in some degree, they voted for Trump, and they're voting for him more than ever. 22 to 37 from first term to second term, 15-point increase. That is massive as well. And I actually expect that number to keep going up, along with the non-Hispanic black adults number too. So it's interesting to see this, and bearing in mind, this is Gallup. This is a liberal pollster, and they're just reporting the facts as they have them. One more thing I'll highlight right here, the party identification. Republicans are more unified than ever. 92% this term approve. 87 was already pretty high on his last term, but it's up 5 more points at 92%. That's huge. That's a very unified party when you look at it compared to where the Democrats are right now, which is they're fractured. They are a fractured party in shambles and divided. And remember, the liberal media, they don't want you doing your own research. They don't want you referring to sources like this on YouTube. They want to spoon feed you their own biased narrative, and they want you believing what they tell you to believe, because that's their agenda that's been assigned to them by the establishment. But all this information, if the liberals could go back in time and do one thing, I've always said this, if they could go back in time and do one thing, they would censor and control the internet from the start. I think that was their biggest tactical error, because when you have freedom of speech and freedom of expression and freedom of press reigning supreme on the internet, the liberals are screwed. It's why their approval rating is 27%. Their disapproval rating is 71%. The truth is out there. and it's unavoidable. And now their party is fractured and people see them for what they are. The internet plays a huge part in that. Elon buying X played a huge part in that. Securing free speech on one platform has forced all the other ones to sort of follow through. But these pollsters are out here, and the liberal media will either underreport it, quickly report it, or not report it at all, because this is a very uncomfortable truth where the current state of the world is right now for them. For the rest of America who voted in President Donald Trump, things are looking better than ever. And while we might face a quick short-term shock value of tariffs going into effect, I firmly believe we are witnessing the best president in modern America history getting started on restoring America to the golden age. But what are your thoughts? Comment down below with them, and I'll reply to every single comment I see. Whether you disagree or agree, tell me why, and thank you so much for watching.